Dungeon mastering is a nerve-wracking role to play in Dungeons and Dragons. You have to become an entertainer, a storyteller, a referee, an encyclopedia, and sometimes even a babysitter. There are several videos on tips and tricks on how to improve your tabletop role-playing game, but very few go into the practicality of those tips and the process of being a dungeon master. But I am here to change that. Hello everyone, I am the Dungeon Engineer and this is my brand new web series, Fantasy Framework. In this series, we will go over the step-by-step process of creating a campaign from scratch, as well as the process of running it. This first part will be focused on how to prep for the beginning stages of your campaign. But before we can even think about running your first session, first we need to... You can use a pre-made setting, or you can homebrew your own world like we are going to do in this video. Regardless of what you choose, you'll still have to do plenty of world building to create a cohesive story. And to make this process as authentic as possible, I'm coming in with zero clue of what type of campaign or world we're going to be making. The only thing I am going off of is the framework that I use for each of my other settings. The key elements you want to create first are in this following order. And when I'm talking about a campaign theme, I'm referring to something like a gothic fantasy vibe like Curse of Strahd, or standard fantasy like Lord of the Rings, or it could even be something like you want your campaign to feel like a Marvel movie. Don't feel constrained by this choice, it's just going to help you make decisions later on. I'm thinking for this campaign, I want a whimsical, high fantasy with a good mix of comedy and serious storytelling. The unique setting trait is the core of our early campaign brainstorming. Easily identifiable characteristic of your world that sets it apart from other settings and affects many aspects of your story. I notice that I tend to get a lot of sparks of creativity and plot points that spawn from this original trait. Beyond that, it provides a bit of narrative intrigue for your players to dive into. It could be as simple as magic is vanishing from the world, or dragons have completely taken over. Or you can be super complicated and go with something like, the world is separated into 7 spheres, and each sphere has its own government, magic, species, and even laws of nature. The point is, you can be as detailed as you want with this trait. It just needs to include these criteria. It needs to have big consequences on the campaign. The unique trait should permeate all aspects of your world. If it only shows up as like a one-off thing on like your 6th session, your players might find it cool, but whenever the 7th session rolls around, they're probably going to forget about it or not even care. With this trait, you should be almost immediately able to come up with ideas on how it would affect how your world would develop. Let's go back to the idea of dragons taking over. The first thing that comes to my mind are the various different types of dragons. And if each type of dragon had their own domain, they could have the land actually molded by which element they use. You could also think about how the structures of the cities would be affected by these large, tyrannical, and flying creatures. Not saying you have to go out and develop all these different ideas, you just have to be able to know that you can think of some. And lastly, your trait should fit your adventure. The world that you're making is specifically to be played in as a role-playing game. If it's a setting that cannot be easily navigated, or it leaves your players with nothing to do, then it's probably not a good setting for your tabletop role-playing game. As well as if you make an extremely dangerous setting, but you're wanting to run it for level 1 characters, there's going to be a disconnect between your world and your game, and we don't want that at all. If you're struggling to come up with any unique setting ideas on your own, you can always go to the idea machine, ChatGPT. And I typed in a really basic prompt. I'm looking for unique setting traits for my D&D campaign. Can you provide me some? And it actually came up with a few really neat ideas. I wouldn't use ChatGPT to write everything for you, but it's useful to get your mind going. Now, with all that explanation out of the way, the unique story trait that I chose for this campaign is the pre-existing world has been fractured into many different pocket dimensions. And I don't have to determine why or how that happened yet, I'm just laying that unique trait out there. But now that we have our trait figured out, it's time for some... Think in big, broad strokes. The world building that you come up with now should have large-reaching effects. Right now, we're mainly just trying to get the vibe of your setting across. To do that, here's the stuff that we're going to touch on, and I'm going to do that for our world. The idea machine never fails. For each topic, I'm creating a list of 3 to 5 bullet points. You don't need to build out everything, you just kind of need to figure out what's going on. An important thing to include always is etymology and deities. Etymology being how your world was made and stuff like that. The first bullet point I have is there's one primary god that constantly reorganizes the pocket dimensions. Second bullet point, there's lesser deities that preside over certain dimensions. Perhaps when the world was fractured, so were the deities. The last bullet point I have is that the world was fractured tens of thousands of years ago. Each plane has been developing separately from each other to the point where they're almost entirely different worlds. Our next topic will be locations, and for this one, you might use towns or cities, but for our campaign, I think it's a little more fitting that we actually define some of the pocket dimensions. And the first one I included was just for fun, a Wild West desert-style dimension. The second location is a large, maybe authoritarian society that possibly has control to jump into other dimensions and come back. The third location is a plane devoid of any civilization or animals, just plants and maybe plant-like creatures. And the fourth is a very small plane that just has enough room for a tiny cabin. I have a couple of those locations that can lead to more of those comedic moments, and I have a couple that tend to lean more serious, so that matches back to my original theme. And then the last topic I'm including is unique aspects. This is a very broad category to encompass any idea that springs off the top of your head based off your unique setting trait. For this one, I have 4 bullet points. The first one is people that travel between dimensions are called plane hoppers. Insert more creative name later. Second point, it's more interesting if interplanar travel was recently discovered so that dimensional planes have only been in contact with each other momentarily. Third point, the edge of each pocket dimension is a large drop-off that goes into a large space-like void. Fourth point, each location could have their own magic or rule of law. Some pocket dimensions could even be completely separated from others. You don't want to go overboard with creating a lot of these ideas. We can expand on a lot of these ideas later, or even just completely scrap any of them. I only really wrote 1, maybe 2 sentences for some of them. But for now, they're going to serve as the basis for introducing our players to our campaign setting. Speaking of, it seems like we need a... Conflict is at the core of any good campaign, and we are going to go back to that unique setting trait to form our conflict. I came up with 3 conflict ideas, and I'm going to expand upon 1 to create into the full campaign. The first one is dimensions begin to go missing, or they begin to be corrupted by a mysterious force. The second one is one highly militaristic dimension is invading all of the others to conquer and expand their territory. The third one is that there is a dimension that is one ginormous dungeon, and at the center of it is a legendary MacGuffin. When we choose our conflict, we want to consider our players' role in it, because hopefully they will be the ones to solve it. And for our setting, I want to expand upon the idea of the plane hoppers to create our conflict. My thinking is that the party will be a group of these plane hoppers, and for one reason or another, they will have to travel across dimensions to solve a certain problem. Keep in mind when you choose a conflict, make sure it is large enough to cover an entire campaign and not just a one-shot. But at the same time, you want to keep your conflict flexible, so as you understand your world more, you can mold your conflict into what you want. Right now, the conflict that is speaking the most to me is the corruption idea, so I'm gonna go with that for right now. However, I'm thinking we give the corruption a new name to make it sound a little bit more ominous, cause, why not? Let's call it the Withering. The conflict that we choose in our brainstorm, we're gonna designate as our A-plot. This will matter later on, just know that it means that this conflict permeates throughout the entire campaign. All you need to do now to create your player plot hook is to combine your theme with your unique setting trait, with your conflict and your player's role in it. And without further ado, this is my campaign hook for this freshly made setting. Hello prospective players, I want to ask you if you'd be interested in playing in my homebrew D&D campaign. It is a whimsical, high fantasy campaign in which the pre-existing world has been fractured into numerous pocket dimensions. Interplanar travel has been recently discovered, and now the once scattered civilizations are now reuniting again. However, not all is well. The Withering has begun corrupting and dismantling dimensions, leaving nothing but remnants floating in the vast void. You must utilize plane hopping to travel to a variety of dimensions to find a way to end the Withering once and for all. Although it seems like we didn't do much prep, we have made that solid foundation to build the rest of our world off of. But with that, our brainstorming is done for now. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. See you next time.